This is Robert with Virginia Farm Bureau's Grain Division. Glad to bring you the Merchandiser Minute today. It's Friday, September the 25th, 2020. And once again, we've been given the gift of another week, and y'all got a lot done in the field this week. I think every hay baler was running in Virginia, as well as every combine. I congratulate y'all for getting a lot of work done and doing it safe this week during National Farm Safety Week. We certainly had a lot of influences in the futures market and even in local basis markets this week. Give me or Josie a call in the coming days. We can discuss with you some new developments with corn basis and new developments with soybean basis. We've got a lot of opportunities here in Virginia to market your crop, and that's something to really celebrate and be thankful for. When we look on the futures side, we saw a big shift this week. Whether you want to call it a change in market psychology or just a correction, maybe a correction in futures prices to the downside that's heading to a new trend. We don't know that, but we do know that the speculator who coming into the week, the managed money speculator, was long futures in corn, wheat, beans, live cattle, and I think feeder cattle, as well as lean hogs. Just a very optimistic approach to price going higher. And it seemed like when the board opened Sunday night for the Monday session that psychology had changed. We saw what one teacher teaches me, the word he uses is risk off. We saw a risk off mentality this week go through these futures markets as the speculators paused their buying and they sold futures contracts that they had previously bought, profit taken. Coming into the week, we had a lot of influences over the weekend with the death of a Supreme Court justice, with some more social unrest. Those types of things do spook the outside influences that work our markets, and we saw the Dow at one point down 1,000 points on Monday. A lot of volatility in the equity markets this week as there were rumors of certain European countries putting more travel restrictions on. Certain states here in the U.S. seeing an uptick in COVID cases. All that put some risk-off mentality into the equity markets. And at the same time, we saw the dollar futures this week rally sharply higher. And we know basically since the 1st of July, as we've seen a downturn in dollar futures price, we've seen an upturn or an uptick in exports. So seeing that dollar go up this week, seeing the volatility in the equity markets, maybe that got some of these speculators wanting to get some profit out. And all that aside from just looking at fundamental influences on corn, wheat, and beans. So we had 2 days this week where the Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell testified before a subcommittee at Congress on the House side, I believe, about monetary policy here during this corona outbreak and what he's going to do going forward in the future. Take a look at that information. All that has big impacts on what we do. And remember, the weather was ideal this week here, many days for harvest. That same thing goes true for most of the Corn Belt. There were a lot of bushels getting harvested this week. Farmers were selling bushels off of the combine, and that put downside pressure onto the markets as well. So let's see, December corn, see if you can remember this, down 13 cents for the week. They closed at $3.65 a bushel. November soybeans down 41 cents a bushel for the week to close at 10.02. And July wheat, your new crop contract for next summer, down 26 cents a bushel for the week to close at 5.56. We did see some life in the Chicago wheat futures and the hard wheat futures Kansas City this week on Tuesday. Egypt made a ginormous purchase of wheat from Russia. That put a little bit of legs under that futures price. And a story that developed all week we've all heard about. It looks like for sure now it is a La Nina year coming in 2021. We haven't had a La Nina year, the meteorologists tell me, since 2017. The thermometers that are floating along the equator in the Pacific Ocean are recording the coolest temperatures in 10 years. When that happens, when La Nina happens, generally speaking, and what we have precedent for, we get dry weather. in Argentina, and we get dry weather next summer in the southern plains. So we'll be watching that and see how it plays out. But that story puts a little bit of legs underneath, a little bit of support on your futures price. EIA report this week, looking at the ethanol industry, production was down 2%. Stocks were up 1%. And remember, the industry is trying this perfect balancing act on stocks to use and trying to keep those prices at a level that they can make money. When we look at October unleaded gas futures, today they closed $1.20 a gallon, and October ethanol futures traded this week between $1.30 and $1.35 a gallon. So still ethanol higher than gasoline. We don't like to see it like that, but that's where those markets are. And certainly corn for ethanol use, why are we paying attention to it? The EIA report told us this week 90 million bushels were ground last week for ethanol. A year ago it was 94 million. So we really have seen a quick recovery from the COVID shutdowns and seeing these ethanol plants grinding almost as much corn as they were grinding a year ago. We still want to see improvement in that area, obviously. We saw a shift in a news story this week. For so long we've heard about typhoons and some other weather problems that have impacted China's ag industry. We saw some stories this week that said China will have a large crop. So take that for what it's worth and dig into it a little bit, but obviously what China does with their numbers and what their crop size does certainly has an impact on your price. When we look at some USDA reports, we had flash sales announcements, big export sales this week, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. Just phenomenal to see those sales, and we know that's been, since the beginning of August, the demand side has been what's drove the rally in futures price for corn and for beans. We've got Virginia beans this week. Coming into the week, it's at 63% good to excellent. That matches the U.S. bean good to excellent rating. And we saw Virginia corn this week at 46% harvested. And believe it or not, a year ago, National Ag Statistics tells us that we were 72% harvested coming into this week. So we'll look forward to those new numbers on Monday. Remember, we got month end and quarter end next week. The big funds will be closing their books out for those two events. And we also have the quarterly stocks report on September 30th. Best guess, 2.2 billion bushels of wheat in the bin, 2.2 billion bushels also of corn in the bin, and 576 million bushels of beans in the bin. So we'll be looking for that report on the 30th. Watching South American weather and Corn Belt harvest weather. And we'll talk to you. Call in. This is Robert at Virginia Farm Bureau's Grain Division.